Hey everyone, welcome to Watch It Paint It. In this video, we're going to be doing something different in terms of the sort of video that I'm going to be making for once. This video, I have painted the miniature entirely before I'm even recording. I did not intend to make a tutorial for Captain America, and therefore I painted it off camera, and what's turned out is that I think it's come out quite well, and I thought I would like to share with you the process. And the first process was picking a miniature. Now, this is going to be quite controversial. I picked Captain America because I was going to paint in a different way to normal. I thought I might ruin the model, and I don't care very much about Captain America. Ugh. I know a lot of people really like Captain America. I don't even know why I dislike him. I think it's because he's got vague superpowers. Now, if you're a comic book fan, you probably understand all of his superpowers. If you're in the MCU, like myself, I think his powers are vague, and all I really know is he's very good at jumping away from danger, and that's about all I've ever seen him do. On top of that, I dislike the colours. Now, don't get me wrong, red, blue, and white, it looks fantastic on a flag, even sometimes amazing on a flag, but on a character, Superman, I'm never keen on his uniform. Captain America, again. And I know in modern days, these uniforms are changing. I think that reflects the fact the colours just don't look that good together. But other than that, I guess the third reason, he's a bit of a goody-goody, isn't he? He's a team player, and I'm just not a team player. I'm all about myself and that sort of thing. So anyway, guys, that's a bit of a prelude to why you didn't see me paint this up on tutorial. Do let me know in the comments below if this video is still useful, because I don't know. I could do this a lot of times. I enjoy painting off camera. It's incredibly difficult to paint everything on camera, so occasionally I would like to sit back and relax. So without further ado, let's have a look at what I used and did to get Captain America in the standard that you can see here. Right, guys, I just wanted to start by showing you everything that I used painting up Captain America. The first most important thing is the artwork. I like to stick to the art depicted in game, so I made sure I had this handy. I used a bunch of cards because you get multiple different stances and images, so you can see a bit more of him, as well as using the back to get a nice clear picture of him. The first thing I did was to grab my trusty hobby holder, use a bit of tack, stick him onto that, just so I've got a better hold on him, and I don't get paint all over my hands when I'm painting around the bottom, and I don't keep touching bits I've already painted. The next thing I did, and I don't often do this on the channel, so I'll make a comment and a note here, is I used the Game Color, Vallejo's Game Color range. I normally just use Army Painter's paint, but Game Color do state that you don't always, or you don't have to use a primer when you use the Game Color range. Now, I would normally and always recommend using a primer. I just think it normally makes it easier to paint on than that bare plastic, as well as if you use the Army Painter range, you've got a whole bunch of color primers to go and get the base coat. So ultramarine blue color primer might have been perfect here, doing most of the blue, but I was holding a baby, as I often am when I'm painting now, and I didn't have the capacity to shake or use a rattle can, so I went and grabbed some Game Color so I could just paint stood up holding a baby. Didn't need to intoxicate him with any fumes or just shaking the can and waking him up. So that is why I'm going to talk about using the Game Color range in this video. And I did use a lot of Army Painter once I'd got that base coat on in essentially what I was using as a primer. I then used some of Army Painter's new color metallics to give him a bit of a shiny shield, and I got some washes. I didn't use them much, but I did use a little bit of wash. We'll talk about that. Finally, I did hand painting of varnish just for accuracy to do different types of varnish in various places. Let's just cover the brushes. So I only used 3 brushes as well, and it was basically my Redgrass Games set. This is the 00, which I did 99% of the model. You can see it's not even got a good tip anymore, and I complain about that all the time when I'm painting, that I've ruined my brushes. I actually have multiple new copies of this because I like the brush and I've picked up some, but I'm just grinding this one into the ground, and hopefully you like how this model came out, and you can see what you can do with a knackered brush. It's still fine, like I'm getting on with it. I wouldn't recommend using a naff brush, but 95% of this model was painted with that. Then I used their size 2, which is their larger brush. They only do 2, and this was for some of the blue and basically the base. I did all of the base using this giant brush. That's where I tagged that one in. And then finally I used Game Envy's 00 Saber brush. They also make the hobby holder, and this was a much, even though it's 00, the same as this brush, much finer point, and I just did the finer details, edge highlighting, and these eyes, that sort of thing with this small brush. So this is everything I used, and now let's just talk about where and when I used it. So with most things, I start from the inside of the miniature moving outwards. So I started with his flesh, his face, that's covered mostly by his mask, and it was the hardest to get to place. I'm basically assume I was using the 00 Redgrass Games brush for everything unless I say otherwise, and that's what I use for this Pale Flesh by Vallejo. Now, if you do follow the channel and stick to sort of the paints I use, it's mostly army paints, so I will mention that would basically, I don't have the exact colour, but I would have used Survivor Skin mixed probably 50-50 with white, something like that, just paling up a flesh. If you want him to be pale, if you want him to be a bit darker skin tone, you can just use the Survivor Skin and you'd be fine. So I just painted in all of his face, I just did his whole eyes, including his eyeballs, and I did his ears as well around the side, and then his fingers are poking through and underneath as well, and including this thumb here. Ooh, have I just noticed a bit of a mess here? Dun dun dun. Nobody ever looks under there, don't worry about it. But I also got his fingers here, and that was all for the flesh. It took many coats. I watered it down and did 4, 5, 6 coats. Slow and steady wins the race. Didn't care where it went. It's so light anyway, so I wasn't being careful where I painted. I was being quick and lots of coats. And that was his skin tone. After his skin, I moved on to the blue, which I'd say is the next level in, and for that I used Game Colour again because I'd not primed this, and that was their Magic Blue. If you're sticking to sort of the army painter colours that I would normally use, something like Ultramarine Well Shaken is going to be a similar-ish colour, and that's kind of where I would go with that if you're sticking to that. Another reason, not only was it that I didn't have it primed, I just really like this colour, Magic Blue, and it was a big pull knowing that I was going to be primarily painting this Captain America figure in a big bright blue, so it was a second pull to that, but bonuses really on just not having to go outside, prime it with a rattle can. So again, I in this one I might have jumped up to the big brush for at least the base coat and just smashed blue everywhere, not being particularly careful because the miniature started mostly as blue anyway, so you kind of paint it up over the same colour. So I was just quite quickly applying this blue all over the miniature. I did this bit in blue here too. I don't know if it should be blue, but that's what colour I did it. I couldn't find it anywhere in the artwork what that might be, so I painted all of him blue. Got his collar under here as well. That was a bit tricky, probably downsized to the brush. I will definitely have downsized around his eyes because I'd already painted all this flesh in, so I was being careful around here. A little bit careful around this A as well, just because white's harder to paint over. But as I mentioned, it's blue to begin with, so it didn't really matter. So that's now, most of the miniature was now painted. Next up, it's really just a choice of whatever you want to do next, but I did brown, and I used Beastie Brown again because it wasn't primed. And then if you want an alternative in Army Painter, something like Dirt Splatter is going to do you fairly close, fairly similar to that. And for that, I will have just downsized my brush because now most of this is blue, so I'm on the 00. I will have just gone round, got all the brown. This bit's a little bit tricky, so I'll have painted all of the silver brown to begin with. I'll also got all of these pouches in, and then his belt here. Won't have been careful where the silver is, just getting brown in. And I painted all of his boots brown to begin with because red will go easy over brown anyway, so that was no problem. So yeah, just lots of little detail, well, just fine work with the 00 brush, and that's brown covered. I'll have busted out bloody red next. Again, if you want the Army Painter equivalent, I'd use something just like Abomination Gore, quite a reddy red, and that would look just as nice, I think. And yeah, again, small brush, just painting in everywhere that wants to be red. So good few coats because I hadn't primed it, still using the Game Colour range at this point. Will have taken 4 coats or so, thin coats over all of these, carefully in here. And then I wasn't super accurate. I just did these roughly, so I didn't go too close to the edge on the boots because they're quite hard to get to. I just did it as well as I could, and then I touched this up much later on the back. Took a few touches up to get this how I wanted it, but red here, and red here. For the shield, I did some base coats in this red as well, just because it's the primer color that I was using. So I painted all of the shield red parts in red as well at this point. I should mention I'd forgot that this will also be magic blue, this blue part to begin with, just because I was using it as a primer. We've almost finished priming now, or base coating / priming. So I used Vallejo's white primer. It's called white primer, but they're all basically can be used as primers. So here I did many coats. Army Painter equivalents obviously just matte white, and I just did lots and lots of white coats over these patches here, over the A as well. and on his shield in the white sections, both the star and this circle here. And I did a little bit on his helmet here and here, but I wasn't worrying about that until the details stage. But I did that, and I also did his star just to give it that base primer sort of coat. For his base, I just used the Giant 2 brush, and I've just applied this watered down, but all over the whole base, including the side. I did that as well, the rim, and I also did the grey, all just grey, just super quick, no time wasted there. The reason the black's here is because the metallics, I wanted to use the small brush again, and I just used it as a primer to get this in black, and I also doubled it up as the shade. You can see this black line here is just purely where I didn't paint the silver over the top. I also rimmed the base with that black as well, just to make it pop out. Now at this point, I'd primed the miniature and done the base coat, so now I could start picking any colours that I wanted. And the next thing I was going to do is the shield. So I grabbed a bunch of Army Painter's new colour metallics, and as you can imagine, I used the gemstone for the red, the elven armor for the blue there, and then I mixed 50-50 Army Painter's matte white, as I mentioned before, an alternative, 50-50 with this fairy dust, and that produced, it's more or less white, but it's got a little bit of shine, a little bit of sparkle on that shield. I just very carefully painted that up. Now at this point I'd finished the entire base coat, and we were going to move on to a little tiny bit of washing the miniature. I used Flesh Wash by the Army Painter, and that was purely for the flesh. Let's try and get nice and close so you can see some of it. I just took the small brush, not the smallest yet, that's only really used that for detail, and put a little bit of Flesh Wash on my brush and just ran it. I can't do this behind the camera. No, I can. I just ran it down this line here and up the side and round his nose, in his eye holes here, everywhere you could imagine that would have some shade, and in between his fingers as well. Very precise and very carefully. Once that was dry, I will just be highlighting it back up in that base colour, so I just used the pale flesh again and just touched up anywhere that I'd just let it run a little bit too much. So I brought that wash back up to the line, and I didn't highlight his flesh at all. If I was going to, it would be his nose just ever so slightly, but I didn't even bother. There is no highlight to him, it's just toned down a little tiny bit. Then I have taken Army Painter's blue tone, and I did all the blue in the same way. Again, dipping a little bit on a small brush and very precisely painting exactly where I wanted that wash to be. Just down this crease on both sides, down any recesses I could find, and along outlining all of the blue material from his uniform. I also got it in the eye holes and painted round, darkening down that wash there, so you can see his eyes are really profound, really popping out. Went round the A, went round everything. Take a good look. Hopefully you can see that as I've been flashing this around, but every single dark bit of blue is me carefully painting that wash on as a normal paint. The final wash I used was the dark tone. It's a black wash by the Army Painter, and this wasn't used for very much at all. The browns were used in exactly the same way as I did with the blue, a little bit on the brush, and very carefully painted that black wash in anywhere that I wanted it to show, comic book style, popping out the details around the edge. Oh no, I didn't even do around the edge of his belts across his chest, that's just blue there. But I did do it around his eyes. So this was all painted in flesh colour, as I mentioned. I then just got a lot of wash on the brush and put it in the centre of his eyes, dabbed it in, and that will run off his eyes into the recesses around his eyeballs, and that produced that black line. I did that twice, and it builds up a really strong black outline to his eyes. And that's it, that's all the washing done. After that, I was just taking base colours and just painting back in very carefully anywhere that that wash had run a little bit more than I wanted to. Just bringing out all back to base colour, no highlighting whatsoever. Then for the final bit, I did do some highlighting, but very little. I grabbed some electric blue. If you want the Army Painter equivalent, you're going to be talking about something like Void Shield Blue. And I mixed this 50-50, maybe not. Judge it by eye, and I just got a teeny tiny bit. You might not even notice it, it's that subtle, but I just got a tiny bit of slightly lighter magic blue, and you can see there's a hard line here, and I just used definitely used the small brush for this. I got some very watered down on the brush, and I used it super slowly, side on, edge highlighting this line here, a little bit on his eye, on the bottom of his mask, down here as well. There's a bit on his chest just here. There's a bit across here as well. And I got the seam of his trousers. Anywhere that's a hard edge that's raised around these random squares on the side here. Did exactly the same. His shoulder bits up here, the back of his helmet. Anywhere that's got a hard edge, a really sharp edge, I just did that. And it's a very subtle highlight. You can barely see it. And it really looks great in person. And for the brown, I did exactly the same. I took the Beastie Brown, mixed in a little bit of white, maybe 20%, not very much. Judge it by eye, very subtle highlight. And I just went round again all of the hard edges and just made those edges pop out that little bit more. I did no highlighting on any of the red. The red's just exactly as it was. And that's it. That was really all of the highlighting. What have I missed? Oh, I did some grey. I just applied a black wash to the base. Sorry, apologies, I missed that. And I just gave that a grey edge highlight. Didn't mix anything in. That's just back to the base colour. And then I did some metallics. So I used Army Painter's Claymore blade here. And that's all I used for the metallics. And this was primed in the black, which I just left in as the shade. I just didn't paint in the holes, in the recesses. And I just gave it 2 coats carefully of the Claymore blade. I also did these little buckles on his helmet, Claymore blade. All of these buckles on his pouches, Claymore blade. On his belt, Claymore blade. Just carefully leaving the black from before there as though it's the shade. And then I also did this grate. I didn't paint in the grate. I left that. It was the black from the wash. But I painted the grate so it's a little bit silver, a little bit more interesting on the base. And I painted the back of his shield as well in silver. I couldn't tell what colour that should be, but I thought that'll do, right? That's fine. And then for this star on his chest, after I'd primed it or base coated it in white, I used crushed skull to repaint it, slightly off-white. Don't even know if that comes out that well on the camera. It's not bad. You can see it's highlighted basically. So I painted the whole thing in crushed white, and then I used the matte white again just to paint back in all of the center points of the star and just giving that a little bit of definition, a bit of cartoony, bit of comic book style definition. Then I guess we've got the final point of his eyes, which, as I mentioned, started with the dark tone. Just let that run into his eye socket. I then got the matte white, multiple coats, just painting back up his eyeball, taking my time, getting his eyes nice and white. I then used the electric blue or void shield blue to pick your poison, and I painted him on a circle of that blue going up to the top, so just filling in a nice iris there. And then it was the black, matte black. So all of this is using the super small brush. Matte black was just a sort of dot of black that I just pushed up to the top as well, giving him a chibi style eye. I did this on both sides at the same time. And then the final bit was matte white, and I just do a single speck on the pupil in the top corner, just as though some light's catching his eyes, and I think that gives a really nice effect. And that was it. That's really all it took. Just lots and lots of little slow, steady increments in the paint. Just really taking time. And then the final step was varnishing him up, just to protect him, because I'm playing this with my kids and he's getting a bit of battering around the table. So I've just given him a coat of protection. I'd normally just go and spray this, but again, holding children can't use rattle cans. And also there's a mixture of metallics and shiny eyes and that stuff. I think some sort of matte varnish would be fine, and then you could touch up the other bits, but it just saved me going outside. So for this, I can't find the matte varnish. It's somewhere on my desk, but so is everything. So basically I did the whole miniature in matte varnish, with the exception of using satin varnish on his belt, on any of the metallics, basically his belt, his buckles, this grate down here, and his shield. That's all done in a satin varnish, a sort of 50-50 glossy matte finish, isn't it? Which keeps the shield a little bit shiny, a little bit more metallic. And then I used a tiny bit of gloss varnish on his eyes, which give him that wet, glossy look, making them look a little bit more realistic, like eyes, except mine are really dry because I just look at screens all day. But if you want nice, healthy looking eyes, go for a little bit of gloss varnish. And that's it. But guys, if I've missed anything, because it's hard to do retrospectively, I just wanted to cover that because I think this has come out, as I've mentioned, one of the best miniatures I've ever painted. It's a completely different style. That's why I didn't film it. I didn't know how it would come out, and it's new to me, and I just wanted to give it a test. But then I wanted to share it with you in case you wanted the tips and the knowledge and just copying the paint structure. Let me know in the comments below if this kind of video is useful, because I often paint off camera and never even think to cover it retrospectively. Let me know if you've got any questions, if I missed anything, if there's anything you would like to know, just fire it off below and I'll get back to you, because they'd probably missed something because my memory's not that good. And then anything I've used in the videos, there will be some affiliate links below. I'll put links to everything below, but I don't make money from all of it. Some of it will make me a small percentage, but it shouldn't cost you any more. Well, I try and link you the cheapest ones anyway, so I'm doing you a bit of research in most cases. Guys, thank you ever so much for watching, and I will see you again soon. Captain America, with the exception of my Pringles lids, which I often use for getting paint all over my hands. I grabbed a bunch of... Ooh. Fuck my life.